Good evening, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and happy first day of spring. It feels sort of springish out there. My name is Jasper Dent. I'm the event coordinator for McNally Robinson Booksellers here in Saskatoon. This event is being held on Treaty 6 territory. This is the land of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota, and homeland of the Métis. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the joint Saskatoon launch of Hello by David Carpenter and Theories of Everything by Dwayne Brenna, both published by Shadowpaw Press. Thank you to Dave and Dwayne for being here tonight and for working with us to create this event. Just to note that this event is being live streamed. There's a web camera just up to your right here. Hello to everyone online, and I would also like to ask everyone in the room to please silence or turn off your phones. Thank you. If you'd like to buy copies of Hello and Theories of Everything, we have some up here on the signing table, and we also have some on the desk by where you first walked in. You're welcome to get your book signed before you purchase it. Just please do remember to stop by the cash desk on your way out. And now I would like to invite a special guest up to get us started. Award-winning author and founder of Shadowpaw Press, Edward Willett. Everyone, please give him a very warm welcome.
I can probably make myself heard anyway, but I'm very happy to be here and here for the launch of these two books. I was very excited when they came my way. I have, since starting Shadowpaw Press in 2018, I've actually published a few books with a Coteau Books connection, and both of these books were, in fact, lined up to be published by Coteau, and then unfortunately, Coteau went away. And I want to thank Dave Margocius to help bring them to my attention, and he also edited both of these books, and Dave is back there. He's on my editorial advisory board, and it's been very helpful as I have worked my way through the mysteries of being a publisher after mostly being a writer over the years. Shadowpaw Press is named after our black Siberian cat, Shadowpaw. That is why there is a picture of a cat on every book that you buy that's published by Shadowpaw Press. I thought that was only fair because when I'm working, there are only me and him in the Shadowpaw Press World Headquarters, and he is of absolutely no help whatsoever. Nevertheless, he gets his picture on every book because he's a cat, and cats that just happens somehow. I'm not sure how. So both of these books are short fiction, literary short fiction, and I'm looking forward to hearing the authors read them. They mostly have existed in my head as I edited through them, and I haven't heard the authors read them in their own voices, so I'm looking forward to that as well. And we're going to start with David Carpenter's book, Hello, and I will introduce David by the time-honored method of reading his biography from the back of the book. So you may know him, you may love him. David Carpenter began his writing vocation as a critic. I first read that as vacation, but no, that's different. Began his writing vocation as a critic and translator in Winnipeg and Toronto. Inspired by a reading by the Moose Jaw Movement, Gary Hyland, Robert Curry, Lorna Crozier, and others in Saskatoon, he switched to writing his own work, which began to emerge in 1985. He's the author of 15 books of fiction and nonfiction and 1 book of poetry. His literary awards and honors include the Saskatchewan Book Awards 2010 Book of the Year for A Hunter's Confession, the Kloppenberg Prize for Literary Excellence in 2015, the Codes Vert Award out of Toronto for the education of Augie Marasti in 2016, and most recently, the High Plains Creative Nonfiction Award out of Billings, Montana for I Never Met a Rattlesnake I Didn't Like, 2023. As well as a recognition for his writing, he was awarded the honorary doctorate from the University of, an honorary doctorate, there's more than one, an honorary doctorate from the University. See, I'm an editor all the time, so when I make a mistake, I always have to correct it. An honorary doctorate from the University of Saskatchewan in 2018. He lives and writes in, you'll never guess, Saskatoon. David.
How does this sound? Is this too loud? Good. Thank you, Ed, very much. And thank you for taking a chance on me. And of course, Jasper, thanks for setting things in motion. Thanks to Margocius for his ferociously sharp eye as an editor. I'm going to read you a scene, and I think we will both leave enough time at the end for a Q&A. Yes, summon your toughest questions for Dwayne. Anyhow. At the poker table of life, Hardy Mudge had held very few aces, and Hardy being hardy, he had not played them well. This time would be a little different, however, because this time he had really worked things out. His ace was the key to his old apartment, from which, 2 weeks ago, he had been evicted for no reason at all. The Barracuda landlady had it in for Hardy from the day he moved there, and now he was sleeping on his friend Mumford's lumpy Chesterfield. Hardy had become obsessed with this caper, so much so that he had almost entirely quit boozing. He took his apartment key to a locksmith and had a copy made, then handed in the originals to Mrs. Barracuda. Nightfall. Hardy is surprised at how calm he has become. Duffel bag under his arm, he takes out his key and unlocks the apartment door, hands shaking but not fumbling. His excuse is ready at the tip of his tongue. Sorry to bust in on you, buddy, but Lane forgot to give you this here key. No one at home. Grace of God or whatever. Much of the new tenant's possessions were still stacked in piles all over the living room. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Hardy glides from pile to pile, top to bottom, silent as a cat in his wool socks. The joints in his feet are cracking. He smells the sweat from his nervous pits, begins to gulp the moldy air around him. 54 is too old for this bullshit. He prays that the telephone will not ring, because if it rings and he doesn't answer it, and people in the building hear him rummaging around, they will know something is up. He also prays that the new tenant will stay true to his plans for the weekend. Into the duffel bag goes a solid silver flute in a case, a wooden box full of cufflinks, an old pocket watch, a genuine elbow-type boomerang, a piggy bank stuffed with change, a nice new 1963 trophy for musical whatnot, sterling silver. A small strummy thing made from the shell of an armadillo, must be worth a few bucks. And a beautiful gold ring. The ring goes on Hardy's middle finger, not a bad fit. There's a big saxophone sitting on the stand, bright as gold, but it won't fit into the duffel bag. That's showbiz. You can hear someone pacing in the apartment next door, and he is reminded of how thin the walls are in his former building. At last, there is nothing left small enough to filch. He zips up the duffel bag and has one final look around his recently abandoned flat. He pulls out some cushions from the new guy's Chesterfield, and what do you know? Like some treasure in a storybook, there lies a worn canvas pouch with a bank logo, heavy as hell, bulging with silver dollars. My. He tiptoes over to his duffel bag and lays the pouch next to the phone, which rings. Holy Moses, shit. Hardy grabs the receiver. Hello? Mr. Mudge, says a lady with an English accent. We are so pleased to hear your voice. You mean I'm still paying for this telephone? I'm not sure. Are you Mr. Hardy Mudge? Hardy now wonders why in hell he picked up the phone. So what if people in the building hear it ring? But Hardy has lived as a bachelor for many years now, and bachelors always answer their phones. Yes, ma'am, that's me. You are a hard man to get hold of, Mr. Mudge. Could you speak up? I'm sorry, but I'm in a bit. You might want to sit down, Mr. Mudge. I have something momentous to tell you. shoot. My name is Louis Binns, Mr. Mudge, and I am happy to announce that your ticket has been selected for the sweeps. Furthermore, the sweeps? The Irish sweepstakes, said the woman. Mr. Mudge, you have won a very tight. Is this some sort of. Once more, she cuts him off. Mr. Mudge, there is one way to ascertain whether we are indeed legitimate. Simply bring your ticket to the nearest branch of the Bank of Nova Scotia, and they will something your winnings. Can you hear me? He grabs for one of the tenant's pens and she repeats her instruction while he scribbles them down. Thought you'd have an Irish accent or something. Don't they all, she said. He thanked the woman and realized that rivulets of sweat were rolling down his eyes. His throat was tightening, and everything from his lungs to his nostrils had gone drooly. Sounds like you enjoy your work, miss. I do indeed, Mr. Mudge, and I hope you enjoy your winnings. Men like you contribute every year to a fine cause and blah, 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 blah. Can we count on you to give some interviews, Mr. Mudge? Mr. Mudge, are you there? Jesus, but don't this woman go on and on. I'm here. Haven't quite digested the news. How much did you say I won? I was leaving the amount to the last. Any guesses, Mr. Mudge? Not a clue. Your ticket on Whackfall to win, Mr. Mudge, has won you £62,400 rounded off. Holy Mother of Christ. You are a lucky man, Mr. Mudge. Have you always thought of yourself as lucky? Not particularly. Say, what's your name? I told you, Mr. Mudge, it's Louis Binns. Oh, yeah, of course. I don't mind confiding in you. I mean, all my life I've had to scramble for a living. It's like I got this anvil over my head, see, and all I have to do is just get slightly out of line, and down she comes to flatten me. I got this friend, Mumford, see, and he tells me that Mudge, that's my name, Mudge. I know, Mr. Mudge. Of course you do, of course you do. Anyway, this buddy, he says, Mudge is the sound of a great big anvil falling on my head from 100 feet up. Not a word of it, not a word of a lie. There, Mr. Mudge, don't worry anymore. And there's nothing wrong with a good cry now and then. A good cry and a cup of tea. That's what my mother used to say. There. You sound like a very sympathetic person, Louie. I don't suppose you live over here, do you? Oh, no, Mr. Mudge, I'm on the other side, over the bounding main. Too bad. I'd love to meet the lady who changed my life, and that's no lie. Suddenly, Louis Binns is helpless with laughter. Not a mean-spirited laughter. It's a gentle laugh. Nothing like his ex. Nothing like the women over here. They'd rather laugh at you than help you up from the gutter. But Hardy cannot dismiss the thought that he and this Louis number have a connection. Somebody should write your story, Mr. Mudge. It sounds fascinating. But I'm going to bid you a fond farewell, and I hope your newfound luck follows you wherever Louis Binns chatters away. What an absolute angel. But suddenly her words take root. Somebody should write his story. It would end with Hardy returning almost everything he swiped from his old apartment. Or maybe it would end with a phone call to Ethel, mother of his son. A tearful apology and then a visit to meet the kid. They'd throw the ball back and forth, and the boy would come to know what Hardy was really like. The book writer. He'd have to be somebody special, somebody who knew about hardship and struggle and how a man can stray and find his way back to the top again. And God damn it, Hardy Mudge, you are that somebody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. And yes, it does sound completely different in his voice than it does in the voice in my head. So that's a good thing. Our second book is Theories of Everything. You can also see it over here. Another collection of short fiction. And allow me to introduce to you Dwayne Brenna. Dwayne Brenna is the award-winning author of several books of humor, poetry, and fiction. The aforementioned Coteau books published his popular series of humorous vignettes entitled Eddie Gustafson's Guide to Christmas in 2000. His two books of poetry, Stealing Home and Give My Love to Rose, were published by Hagios Press in 2012 and 2015, respectively. Stealing Home, a poetic celebration of the game of baseball, was subsequently shortlisted for several Saskatchewan Book Awards, including the University of Regina Book of the Year Award. His first novel, New Albion, about a laudanum-addicted playwright struggling to survive in London's East End during the winter of 1850-51, was published by Kato Books in autumn 2016. New Albion won the 2017 Muslims for Peace and Justice Fiction Award at the Saskatchewan Book Awards. It was also one of 3 English-language novels shortlisted for the prestigious M.M. Bennett's Award for Historical Fiction. His baseball novel, Long Way Home, was published by Pocal Press in 2022, and his theater history text, Nights That Shook the Stage, from McFarland Books, came out in the spring of 2023. His short stories and poems have been published in an array of journals, including Grain, Nine, Spitball, the Antigonish Review, Intima, and the Cold Mountain Review. Dwayne, your turn.
Thanks with this. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Ed and Shadowpaw Press. Thanks, McNally Robinson and Dave. Always a hard act to follow. It's the first day of spring. Spring has sprung, the grass is riz. I wonder where the birdies is. The bird is on the wing, I've heard. Oh, how absurd. I always thought the wing was on the bird. I have had a long and unhappy history with birds through my life, beginning with a parrot refuge that I took my sons to in Kelowna years ago. And I approached a parrot at this parrot refuge and didn't mean to start a fight at all. All I said was, Polly, want a cracker? And the parrot looked at me and it clasped its talons in front of its evil eye, and it did this over and over again. It was alarming. It was horrid, and I began to ask myself what kind of an upbringing this parrot had, and who its master or mistress might have been. And that's the beginning of a story that I'm going to read for you right now. This story is called Blood Red Polish, and it's just me trying to figure that parrot out. On Christmas Day, Esther gave the paper boy a lovely box of sweets. They were maraschino cherries covered in dark chocolate. She hadn't given me a box of sweets. She'd given me lots of things, but she hadn't given me that. I imagined the paper boy savoring those chocolates, the juice of the cherries running down his pimply chin. I imagined him kissing Esther in the front room, she leaning into him and cupping his cheeks in her hands. When the paper boy reappeared at our front door after the Christmas holidays, I flew at him. I wanted to claw his eyes out. You keep away from Esther, I screamed. You keep away. He didn't darken our door for at least 3 weeks after that. And only then because Esther called him on the telephone and asked him why the paper had stopped coming. I was at Esther's shoulder when she called him, and I heard his every impassioned word as if he were in the room with us. It's Susie, he said. She wants to kill me. Nonsense, Esther replied. You're the apple of Susie's eye. She's insane, the boy said. Now, Gary, Esther explained, you know that Susie is just high-strung. She's an African gray. I'll keep her in her cage in the mornings when you come by. It'll make you feel better. It took a little more convincing, and at last the paper boy agreed to deliver the Star Phoenix the next day. Hanging up the phone, Esther turned to me. Now, Susie, she said, I know you'd never wish anybody any harm, but you really must refrain from frightening the paper boy. I cowered a little. I'll try to do better. She couldn't help but smile, and when she smiled, my world was full of light. Who's a pretty girl? She said. Esther loved me. I was her only friend, her only confidant through the silent, mothballed days of old age. She could not confide in the paper boy. She could only dress up in her finest woolen dress and pearls, could only hope that he would notice her miraculous fingernails. He never did. I used to watch Esther polish her fingernails. She was such a lady. She would assemble the shiny implements of the manicure on the Louis XIV table next to her favorite armchair, the plush velvet one with the doily over the headrest. She would cross her legs in the most seductive fashion. She would pick up the lovely curved scissors, and with a glance at me, she would clip, clip, clip the white edges of the fingernails. When I was a mere sprite of a thing, she would say, the boys would marvel at the length of my fingernails. I told them they'd best behave or I'd claw their eyes out. Then came the file with its incessant swish, 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 almost the sound that a crisp new skirt makes when it's fluttering in the wind. When she screwed the cap off the nail polish remover, I almost swooned. I was intoxicated by the scent. At last, she would apply the blood-red polish in slow, long, ecstatic strokes. Later on, in the cold, wet days of March, Esther was looking at the obituaries. Her face went gray. Esther was in the habit of reading the obituaries to me. Poor Sadie, she said on that crisp morning. She was the richest child at my school when we were girls. If you knew Sadie then, when she was a girl, you would never have thought about death and dying. Esther read me the bit about Sadie being mourned by her loving husband of 62 years, Dr. Henry Morrison. Then she put the paper down on the arborite countertop and stared at the bleak day outside her window. Esther was a changed person after that. She kept the curtains closed in our little house, almost as if she wanted to keep an unwanted visitor from peering in. She sometimes wore 2 sweaters for fear of catching her death of pneumonia. She was preoccupied by her own mortality, convinced, and perhaps rightly so, that she did not have long to live. About a week later, we were watching The Planet of the Apes on her old Electrolux television, the original version of the movie with Charlton Heston as the last man on Earth. Esther almost swooned. They don't make them like him anymore, she said. Now there was a man who stood by his principles. At the end of the movie, Charlton discovers the hand of the Statue of Liberty protruding out of the sand, and he cries out in fury at the many generations of lost humanity. You fools, she cries, you threw it all away. Esther was shaken. She turned to me, her eyes reddened. No one wants to be left behind, she sobbed, her voice hoarse with emotion. No sensate human being, at any rate. She put her life in order the next day. Esther was too frugal to waste money on lawyers, so she set about preparing her own last will and testament at the kitchen counter. She recited the articles of the bequests aloud as she composed. I was heartened to hear that the lion's share of Esther's fortune would go to me, to my care and maintenance, with only a small pittance of $5 per week going to Gary, the paper boy, until he reached the age of majority or married, whichever came first. Esther got perceptibly cheerier as she wrote, as if she was enjoying planning her own funeral. I found it curiously unsettling. She was happily divesting herself of all earthly accoutrements and closing the account on the few relationships she had left. Couldn't help but feel that once again, I was going to be left behind, just as I had been by my patron Gertie in another lifetime. Gertie came to a sad end, but I digress. That afternoon, Esther plastered on her makeup, donned her woolen dress and pearls, and went downtown. I didn't see her again until after supper. When she got in the door, she announced that she'd had a wonderful meal at the Chinese cafe down by the bank. I bought you some Chinese food, Susie, she said. Come, have a bite. She spooned some food into a styrofoam bowl on the kitchen counter, and I enjoyed the repast almost as much as she had done. She chattered on happily as I ate. I've just spent the most charming afternoon in the Golden Meadows sunset home, she said. Oh, Susie, you should see it. Wall-to-wall carpet, walk-in bathtub, everything a woman can want. There's a grand dining room with hardwood on the floor, big enough for my entire dining set, sideboard and all. The best part is, it's all covered by the old age pension. I voiced my immediate disapproval. But you don't need an old folks' home. You're doing very well here with me. Esther was adamant. I'm not much of a cook anymore, Susie. I really can't fend for myself. I'll do the cooking. Now, Susanna, you know you can't cook. I'll learn. My voice was suddenly strident. It surprised me, but it shouldn't have done. It was the tone I took toward my last mistress in her final days. Esther laughed softly like Lana Turner in The Postman Always Rings Twice. Calm down, Susanna. Everything will be all right. And then she added a little wistfully, my only sadness is that they don't allow pets in the building. Esther was a regular gadfly after that, cavorting about town like a randy widow. She was making a spectacle of herself. Something had to be done. I was desperately bored while she was away. Something happens to me when I'm left alone for days on end. I get crazy. I start thinking strange thoughts. I start to think about mayhem. My mind kept wandering to thoughts about Gertie, my first mistress, and how she finally succumbed, dead in her own bed, her heart ripped out of her chest. All I could do was watch movies through the endless days. The movie channel was playing old horror films that spring. I saw Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds one afternoon and learned that even sparrows have feelings. The next day, Straight Jacket was playing. I gloried in Joan Crawford's frenzied portrayal of a jilted wife. We sometimes kill the things we love. That's what the movie said. When Esther got home that night, my head was full of Joan Crawford. I could do nothing but repeat the skipping rope rhyme that was immortalized in that motion picture. Lucy Harbin took an axe and gave her husband 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave his girlfriend 41. That's a terrible song, Susie. Esther scolded while divesting herself of her coat. Why don't you sing the theme from Gilligan's Island? Lucy Harbin took an axe and gave her husband 40 whacks. You're angry because you haven't been fed. She opened the thin wire door of my cage and sprinkled some birdseed into the dish. In her haste, she forgot to shut the door again. I refused to eat. Lucy Harbin took an axe and gave her husband 40 whacks. Well, if that's the way you're going to be, I'll just have to ignore you. Esther walked right by me and went into the bathroom. When she saw what she had done, she gave her girlfriend 41. Really, Susanna, Esther shouted over the top of my tuneless singing. You have become quite intolerable these last few days. Lucy Harbin took an axe and gave her husband 40 whacks. You'll calm down. I'll tell you some happy news. My song ended. I needed some happy news. I've taken care of every detail, she shouted cheerily from the bathroom. You will not have a worry in the world when I'm gone. Esther came back into the living room and laid out her scissors, file, and nail polish on the side table by the plush velvet chair. She sat down and began clipping her fingernails. Clip, clip, clippity clip. Now she's got you on her hip. Have you ever heard of a place called Parrot Island? She asked idly. It's a place where parrots go when their mistresses are no longer capable of caring for them. She began filing her nails. It sounded to me like chalk screeching across a blackboard. It's such a lovely place, she continued, on 10 acres of land outside the city, a heated barn where all the birds are kept. She blew the fingernail dust across the room at me. How unsanitary. There are parrots, budgies, lovebirds, you name it. An old farmer with an eye patch comes out and feeds you twice a day, and at night he brings along his ukulele for a sing-song. I was already lightheaded when she opened the bottle of nail polish remover. The room began to reel. It was like a flashback episode of I Dream of Jeannie. I thought I was going to be sick. I knew I was going to be angry at Esther's matter-of-fact tone as she outlined my future in glowing detail. Why not just leave me on a shard of ice in the Saskatchewan River, I thought. That's the kind of respect we have to look forward to when we get old. Parrots almost always outlive their mistresses, Esther said. Did you know that Sir Winston Churchill's parrot is still alive? She chuckled to herself. And such a foul mouth he has on him. I'll show you. A foul mouth, I thought. I've seen Sam Peckinpah movies too. Then the bloody nail polish came out. Esther stared right through me for a moment, almost daring me to commit an extreme act. And then she brushed the polish on as thick as scabs on self-inflicted wounds. You will be looked after, she said. I've signed the contract this very day. She blew on her nails as if she no longer had a care in the world. They'll drop by and pick you up next week. She gave me another piercing look, chuckled her self-satisfied chuckle, and said, there, lovely. Haven't I got the loveliest fingernails in the world? She clicked her thumbnail against the fingernails of her left hand, a systematic display of dominance. The room stopped whirling at that moment, and I saw everything, my life and hers, with extreme clarity. This was no happy ever after Brady Bunch episode. This was straitjacket. Kill! I screeched, shrill even to my own ears. Esther looked up at me. Susanna, what on earth did you say? Her eyes were not her eyes. They were the terrified eyes of Joan Crawford, wide and full of death. She did not have time to chastise me further. I knocked open the flimsy door of my cage. Who's a pretty girl? I screamed. Who's a pretty girl? I flew at her eyes, pierced them as they had pierced me. I plunged my sharp talons into the soft irises. Vitriol fluid spurted from her eyes like oil from a drum. I plucked out her eyes and ripped open her woolen dress. Parrot Island is a lovely place. I have 150 new friends, all numb to their fate. They wait and they wait for their pathetic lives to end. For the time being, they are content to sit beautifully in their cages. Gawking schoolboys point at them and shout, Polly want a cracker, at the top of their lungs. When they appear before my cage, I click my blood-red talons against my foreclaw, like Esther used to do after she'd polished her nails. The children don't stay long to gawk at me. We sing the theme from Gilligan's Island in unison every night. While the one-eyed farmer strums his ukulele, we also sing the greatest hits of the Muppets. I am heartily sick of the Rainbow Connection. I don't like the one-eyed farmer. He has alcohol on his breath, even in the early hours of the morning. Sometimes he dons an eye patch and dresses up like Long John Silver. Then he parades around the Quonset with one of us on his shoulder, mumbling pieces of eight, to the delight of misbehaving school children. Someday, the one-eyed farmer will have to die. Someday. None of us parrots like him. We are every one of us alone. Every one of us searching for the hand of the Statue of Liberty in the sand. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. They're not all like that in the book, but that's just stand out. We're now going to have Dave and Dwayne come up, and they will answer questions. And Jasper, I think, is going to take this microphone out there. And after we've had some question and answers, I will say a few more words to plug the upcoming books from Shadowpaw Press, and then that will conclude the evening. But if you guys want to come up, we'll get this out of the way. Oh, probably that's great. Oh, yeah, and then there's book signing too.
All right, I can bring this microphone out to anyone in the crowd who'd like to ask a question. Right.
So, David Carpenter, I know that Hardy Mudge is based loosely on your own life. Could you tell us more about how much of you is in him?
Sweet bugger all, I think. Yes. I think, seriously, I think that in the stories, I'm usually trying to write at a great distance from my own life. But for instance, there's one story about a terrible drunk, and it's magic realism. Anything can happen in magic realism, and it's not even slightly realistic. But I think even in that story, there's a little bit of David Carpenter winking at you as you read it. In every one of the stories, not just the ones where he has a fishing rod or a banjo, there's a bit of me. I think when I'm creating a character, I'd like to leave a chunk of myself in that character to give it to root the character in something that I can feel confident of. And so I would say, to answer your question, in the story about Hardy Mudge, there's a little bit of there, but for the grace of God go I in Hardy. Perfect. Yes. Other questions?
Yes, do we have another question here?
I think that you ended the parrot story, but we didn't, I hope, hear the end of Hardy Mudge's story, did we?
No. No, Hardy Mudge is ever present throughout that entire. The story itself is a novella about 80 pages long, and Hardy starts the story and almost ends the story, but he doesn't quite end the story, and I won't tell you why.
Next question. Do a lot of spinning in circles at these events.
If nobody has any questions, Dwayne and I have a kind of a tap dance number that we do. And when we do it, we want you all to sing along, okay?
Now I want to see that.
Should be a banjo now. Oh, that was.
All right, well, I have a question for Dwayne. You talked about the parrot that you met. How many other murderous birds have you met in your life?
I was a fan of parrot refuges. I took my kids to every parrot refuge we ever went to, and I went to one in Victoria where a parrot actually did attack me. His name was Bobby, and I remember the lady who ran the parrot refuge had a voice just like a parrot, and she shouted at him as he was coming towards me, "No, Bobby, no!" So yeah, no, as I say, I mean, birds, for some reason, they dislike me, and I don't know why.
So Dwayne, I understand your African gray. We'll have to talk about the African gray issue someday. But so that was quite a character that you developed. Did you have? Was there somebody in your life that inspired that you knew? I don't know, a teacher. I don't know that inspired that.
Well, I'm tempted to say the guys in my writing group, but no, not for the parrot. But there are stories in the book, as Ed said, that are not horror stories. Some of them are quite comedic, often inspired by real life characters. In fact, there's a story in the middle of this book called The Sewing Machine, which was inspired by my grandmother. I'll maybe stand up so I can see you all. It was inspired by my grandmother, who during the 1930s had her sewing machine repossessed, or had the threat of a repossession. And the repo man came out to the farm to get her sewing machine. My mother was a little girl standing beside the stove, and she related this to me. But my grandmother was a formidable woman, and she rolled up her sleeves and crossed her arms and told the repo man that he'd have to be a better man than she if he was going to get that sewing machine. And he went away without it. So that story was definitely based on somebody I knew. Another story early on, actually the very first story in the book is about two rock and rollers. And it was inspired. I was visiting a friend of mine in Victoria, and we were walking through the inner harbor to have supper. And we saw two men, and they were dressed in leathers, both of them. One was in a wheelchair. One was pushing the wheelchair. They were old guys. They had hair the color of seashells in ponytails. They had sunglasses on that looked like welder's goggles. I don't know if you've ever seen those, the kind of sunglasses that just mold around your eyes. And my buddy Bob turned to me and he said, "You know who that is?" I said, "No." He said, "That's a famous rock and roll star right there." And apparently it was. I can't tell you who it was. In my story, his name is Ramsay Baudelaire, and he plays guitar for a band called Ramsay Baudelaire and the Flowers of Evil. But it was all just one image. It was all the image of those two guys, and I thought I just have to write something about them. Turned into a story that was a little too long to read here, so that's why you didn't hear it today. But yeah. So often, the stories are based on people I know.
I'm always curious about where characters' names come from. Do you just have a jar and you just pull out the first name and then the second name?
I have a book at home. It started with a prof named T.Y. Henderson. And in his young days, he was an insurance underwriter, and he found the work so boring that every time he came across a client with a funny name, he would write the funny name down until he had something like 200 funny names. And it was very kind of him. He turned his book of funny names over to me, and I'm still drawing from it. I think the naming of a character can be very important. It can sometimes be emblematic of the character. I avoid that usually. Sometimes I think you go through, in my own case, the older I get, I go through more and more names until I find one that feels like the character rather than demonstrates his moral virtues or something like that.
Have you ever named a character wrong and you changed it midstream?
Yeah, I have. Yes, and then I don't trust my computer to do the changes, so I change them one by one myself each time. And I'm sure I've missed a few.
Do we have any other questions here? Oh, okay, multiple people. I'll come to you first and then up to you.
Dave, can you tell us a little bit about the name of the book, Hello?
Oh, yes.
Once it comes.
Yeah, it's a good question. My book is filled with all kinds of characters who are lonely or alienated, or they're being stalked by mortality. It's a cheerful book, as you can say. And one of the ways they reach out beyond their own isolation is to pick up a telephone and phone somebody. And they may get an answer. Somebody might say hello, but that's no guarantee that they're going to have an easier life after that phone call. In a book such as the one I've written, where there's all kinds of human frailty, all kinds of people surrounded by mortality, you need to have a few moments of grace and a few comic moments as well. So the thing I read tonight was one of those few comic moments in the book. So if you read the book long enough, you're going to find a few giggles in it.
I was going to ask you both about the titles, so I'm going to ask Dwayne about the title for his book, and then I've got one for Carp. Having just read your murder mystery novel, Luck, what's up with you and silver dollars?
I have conceived an immoderate heat for them. I'm going to out myself, and this is a bit of an embarrassment, but for quite a long time, during a low ebb in my writing career, I became a numismatist for my sins. So you can hear the clink of silver dollars wherever you go. My father collected them, and he wanted to make them look nicer. He had some rare ones. And so he got some mercury and rubbed it all over these dollars. And apparently they lost 90% of their value.
Yeah, I mean, going to have coffee with Dave is is an interesting prospect because if he pulls change out of his pocket, there's liable to be a blast 1892 Abraham Lincoln penny in there or something. Something. But yeah, no, you asked about the titles of the books and theories of everything. One of the stories is called that. There are 15 standalone stories, all of them quite different from one another. Some narrated by men, some by women, one by a parrot. They're set all over the world, Costa Rica, Libya, England, Canada, Hawaii, etc. So yeah, it was one of the difficulties actually getting the stories published because people publishers do tend to look for linked stories, characters that run through a short story collection, things like that. But I think the strength of the book is the fact that it's broad and deeply imagined.
Hey, have we got any other questions here?
Clint Hunker is pointing at somebody. Oh, yes. Thank you.
Well, if we don't have any other questions, we are getting close.
We have a
Oh, no, we do.
question.
Okay, perfect.
This isn't a question, but it's something I have to tell everybody about these two amazing writers and a third one, their editor, Dave Margocious. These three men came to my husband's level 4 care bed monthly, and they critiqued each other's writing, kept him writing, and you were really hard on each other. And I was sort of amazed. And then you'd have a whiskey at the end and a good laugh. But then it became a cup of tea. And then at the last time was ginger ale.
I had forgotten that. This is Mildred Kerr, by the way.
Thank you very much for that.
Does anyone feel like following that with a question?
I'm still waiting for the hardball ones.
Question one for each. David, as you try to distance yourself from Munch, have you ever won an Irish sweepstakes?
I have to admit, no, I have not won an Irish sweepstake. No, I've probably dreamed about it.
And the other question is, how did the one-eyed farmer lose his eye? I must have missed that mystery.
That is based on a real character. If you go to Summerland, BC, and go to Parrot Island, you'll find a one-eyed farmer playing a ukulele every night to his parrots. I suspect it had something to do with the parrots. Well, I don't know. He wore a patch over his eye, so he could have just been acting the part for all I knew. So.
Okay, we are almost at time here, so I think I'm going to hand this microphone back to Edward, so you can talk a bit more about Shadowpaw Press.
So thanks, everyone, and thanks, Dave and Dwayne, for that great presentation. I did just want to mention what's coming up from Shadowpaw Press, because last year I put out 20 books, me and the cat, and that was probably a bit much. So this year I'm down to about 8 or 9 or 10 or something. I don't know. So it's still a lot. Coming up actually this week. Now, you mentioned stories that are not linked together, and I actually have an anthology coming out this week that are stories that aren't linked together, and people have commented on the fact it's kind of unusual. The only thing that links the stories in this collection called Shapers of Worlds Volume 5 is that all of the authors, they're all science fiction fantasy authors, and they were all guests on my podcast, The World Shapers. And if you go, this is a plug, if you go to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Edward Willett, you can watch me interview each of these gentlemen on the World Shapers podcast. I interview all of my authors on there. Now that I'm no longer just doing science fiction and fantasy. You can also go to theworldshapers.com, and there's 100. I just did episode 190 will be coming out this Sunday. The guy I interviewed this week is Art Bell, who was the founder of Comedy Central, not the internet guy that died that did all the conspiracy stuff. This guy was the founder of Comedy Central, and he was president of Court TV, and now he's switched to writing fiction. So he's an interesting guy to talk to. So you might want to check that out. So that's the next book that's coming out. That's on Tuesday. As you can tell, because it's volume 5, there's 4 previous ones. So there's 106 different authors represented in those anthologies. Then I have a nonfiction book called Cupboard Love, a dictionary of culinary curiosities. It hasn't been in print for 20 years. It's a very funny and interesting book about, where does buffet come from? Where do all these words that we use surrounding culinary things come from? By an author named Mark S. Morton, who's a very well-known nonfiction writer. I also published his YA science fiction novel, The Headmasters, last year. I have some reprints coming up. I have a book called The Night Girl, which is a young adult fantasy set in Toronto, which was in the news because in the original version of this book, the CN Tower was on the cover, and he made the news because the CN Tower people said, you can't use a picture of the CN Tower on your cover, it all belongs to us. And they were eventually convinced that, in fact, you can use a picture of the CN Tower. And there is a smaller picture of it on the new cover as well. That was an interesting way to get publicity. And then I have Harriet Richards. I published her new edition of her book, The Lavender Child. And I have her short fiction collection in reprint, Waiting for the Piano Tuner to Die. There'll be a new edition of that coming up. I have a novel of my own, a young adult fantasy novel called Fireboy, coming out in July. I have another science fiction novel called Gods of a New World, which involves trillionaires, AI, and how they are taking over the world. So I don't know if there's anything timely there or not. And then in the fall, I'm very excited. A couple of more books that Dave Margosius has edited. Glenn Sorstad's new poetry collection, first one in 6 years, is coming out this fall. It's called First Light, Last Light. And another short fiction literary collection by Betty Jane Hegarat, who's out of Calgary, is coming out. It's called Elephants in the Room. And then I have a reprint of my own, a fantasy novel called Mage Vein, which came out from Daw Books in 2011. I'm bringing out in a new edition under my pseudonym, the Arthur Chain. And that's this year. So next year, I'm going to slow down. I think I will probably slow down next year. So that's Shadowpaw Press. You go to shadowpawpress.com, you can find everything that I publish. And if you go to McNally Robinson and they don't have the book and you ask them to bring it in, they will actually buy a copy and order a copy and put it in, and then you can get it here. And I highly recommend that. Also, libraries. Tell all your libraries that you go to that they should have every book ever published by Shadowpaw Press and at least 20 copies of each of these gentlemen's books, I think would be a good start. Okay, so I think they're going to sign books. If you would like to buy them, Jasper can have the last word here.
Okay, thank you so much, Ed. And thank you again to Dave and Dwayne for coming here and reading tonight. And thank you everyone for coming out. Happy first day of spring once again. Please buy books and get them signed. Have a good evening, everyone.
That's right on.